First of all, just to congratulate Christine and all of us for having the privilege of such a fantastic panel. I think this is absolutely a fabulous opportunity. And after such a rich morning, I realize I probably would like to change the script entirely. The session is on zeroing in on impacts, and we're expected to cover science, impacts, policy, and values. But I realize that the natural place to start, in fact, is most likely as follows. I think we all share in the room the feeling that the more science we get on the table, the fuller we understand the picture, two things happen. One is that the complexity just appears to be mind-boggling, and which normally immediately shuts down communications, if it is to the general public or if it is to policymakers. But the second thing that happens is that it clearly shows that the risks are, if possible, even larger than we previously thought when we start to understand the interconnections between biodiversity, climate, land, water, and its impacts on human development. So the question then is, what is science doing wrong, or what could science do better in terms of communicating this complexity and the risks? And I'd like to invite, first of all, those of you who are haven't been on stage. I'm thinking particularly if you, Dr. Hu Tao, would like to start, just to give your perspectives of following this morning. And I'm referring back to the comments this morning by right through the morning that science is the basis for action, after all, but we're getting almost paralyzed by the science and its complexity and its drama. And what's your advice in terms of what could science do better, if anything, in terms of communicating to decision makers? And I'd like to follow with the same question to you afterwards, Changhua Wu, if you're willing. And given that we have you, Jim, on the stage, who have been battling since the 70s in this area, I also invite you to address the same issue. What can science do better? But please, Hu Tao.
Thank you very much, Johan. And to be honest, I would say I'm not a scientific researcher. Instead, I'm the concept of scientific development research. If you know the concept, development of scientific development, 科学发展观. So that's right now. It's very popular in China. And I really found, climate is really changing. It has some impacts on our daily life. I actually, before I left Beijing for Hong Kong, I caught a cold. And if I cough, please forgive me when later I'm talking. The reason I found, I got a cold, partly climate is changing. I don't know what other reasons behind that. But another reason that's clear, I found is related to China's efforts to mitigate the climate change. In Beijing, for the central heating system, in winter, normally it starts exactly at November 15th. And the heating system, central heating system, must end at March 15th. That's a little bit flexibility, maybe 1 day early or late. That's not a municipal regulation, that's a nationwide. Broadly, China has another policy, not only Beijing. And the people who are living north of Huaihe River, generally speaking, they don't have the heating system in winter. Only the people south of Huaihe is allowed to have the heating system. That means in winter, about half of Chinese no heating system. We can argue, that's something historically we have such a kind of system. But the question is now people are getting rich. China even has a 2.5 trillion US dollar reserve. When the people rich, they definitely is affordable to consume more energy for heating in winter. is it allowed for the people to have changed their lifestyle, change the consumption pattern? I think that's a really question related to how human being can reflect to such a kind of scientific predicted result in the future. And another regulation actually is also nationwide. For all of the public areas, for heating in winter shouldn't be higher than 20 degrees. For cooling in summer shouldn't be lower than 26 degrees. It's another regulation, national regulation of China.
Okay.
I want to add a little bit more, why people actually in China are, able to afford such a kind of high energy consumption. It's related to also the value change. People definitely in the history, I mentioned we have been, have such a kind of life for 1,000 years. Like my grandma, she's just, we just celebrate her birthday. She's now just 100 years anniversary birthday this year. She's a Buddhist. She eats vegetarian food. In winter, she gets used to the cold temperature in Sichuan province. And it's opposite, my daughter. She's 16, almost 16 years. She told me, Daddy, can we go back to the States? I said, why is that? So she said, I wish, we changed the lifestyle here. And we used to stay in Oregon, US. She said, I wish to drive my SUV to the gym, taking the escalator up, running on the running machine. I said, hey, if your purpose is to do exercise, to run, why don't you just run outside? You don't have to drive. You don't have to take escalator. You don't have to run on a running machine. I want to emphasize, fortunately or unfortunately, the young generation in China, their lifestyle is changing from my grandmas to my daughters. I don't know, maybe for the welfare is a good thing for Chinese people. For the climate change, definitely is not. So I have no answers. I leave the question to other panelists to join me for the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And it was in a way just an indirect answer to my question, but I think that what you're saying is in fact that the science doesn't really eat itself into individual behavior until you really feel the impacts, and in a way that's what you're flagging. I'm wondering, Changhua Wu, I mean, you're working with the climate group, so prominently involved in awareness questions regarding climate change in China. Do you feel, I mean, what would you say to science in terms of what can be done, if anything, better than what you're seeing today?
Okay. Emphasizing a few points, I might challenge it, look at the issues actually to be more objectively, to be fairly. I think actually overall the scientific community worldwide has done a great job in terms of putting the information knowledge together. That's why today we'll be able to, so many people sitting in the audience actually listening to the two leading scientists actually talking about the climate change issues. If they hadn't really done such a great job, if nobody believed in the science or something like that, I don't know why you are here. It doesn't make too much sense. So I would rather, give more fairness to the excellent work, so many scientists around the world actually who've been devoted to this process. In the meantime, second point, I want to emphasize that science, we all studied science when we were in school one way or another. I'm not a scientist actually by training. I'm not a policy analyst. But I did get some kind of basic scientific training. We all know science, there's nothing absolute in it. Basically saying that's the end point, that's it. In the meantime, actually, it is a process. And so we get to know more. The scientists have been gathering information, connecting the dots and then presenting whatever their findings. In the meantime, we know there's still so much we do not know yet. There's huge uncertainty out there that's going to require more scientists, more efforts actually to be made into that process. So along the way, down to the future, we can know more. So I think that we should take that as a given rather than saying, you know, look at the scientists, you messed up our situation, our life, everything like that. You said that this climate change is changing, and you know, literally wanted to change everything like that. I don't think that's going to sell. Rather, I think probably you all agree with me that science, there's always uncertainty there. So far, at this moment, there are issues actually in the scientific process. But other than that, we have to, no one is perfect. So we have to accept the fact. We have to respect the scientists' scientific work in there. The third point I want to emphasize, so far, if you look at around the world, actually there are people who are skeptical about science of climate change anyway. I'm fine with that. I think that's normal. And it's not like universally everyone has to, you know, accept only one thing. Rather, actually, if you look at the majority, the mainstream, people recognize, accept the fact that climate change is happening and we have to change. That's why, of course, in the international process, we have this UNFCCC Kyoto Protocol. We're still struggling, trying to figure out what's next, and that's going to pull the world together. But more importantly, actually, you look at the national level. Countries like China, even US actually, and down to the local level, EU, many other countries, they're all making policies, one way or another actually, based on the scientific recommendations, findings actually, to make, you know, policies changes. Particularly now look at China in this part of the world, the country is really seriously looking into dramatic shift in terms of development pathways. We all know actually we cannot stick to the path we've been on actually in the last 3 decades or so. This country has to change. Of course, you know, it's not just for the sake of the climate change issues, but definitely there is a very important element in there because we know climate change is happening and we have to figure out how to mitigate it, and of course to a certain extent we have to learn how to adapt it to that. But back to the recommendation scientific community, I think actually, again, I tend to be more positive about the scientific community's work so far. If there's anything that, you know, from scientists' perspective, they could improve, I think it's more like how do you communicate more effectively. You have to figure out, of course, you know, we have 2 leading scientists here talking here today in front of so many people. And you have to work with media and make sure educating the media community, they would be able to help you communicate in a kind of right way or correct way. I think that part of the confusion is that the communication actually so far hasn't been very effective to a certain extent, and that's why we're talking about the issue, asking the question. I believe that's why you're partly asking the question here. There's something wrong or whatever is inadequate that scientists need to improve their work. I think the only thing I would emphasize the communication, particularly the effectiveness of communication. That probably is the one area actually scientific community needs to figure out how to work with NGOs, with government officials, with business community, with the media, trying to figure out to get the message through, and not only to this generation, but more importantly to the next generation.
Thank you.